Guidance is internal. Ignition sequence starts. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Permission to board, please.
Permission to come aboard. Permission to board.
Permission to board.
Do I have some permission to board that sweet mothership?
This is the Permission Granted podcast. Here's DA.
Welcome inside the most recent edition of the Permission Granted podcast. Of course, you can listen to any PGP, and it would have been the most recent at that point in time. But this one actually is PGP number 104. I'm not lying. PGP number 104 available on iTunes. Simply subscribe on iTunes by typing in Permission Granted. Or you can get the weekly podcast in the middle of the rest of the DA Show episodes by going to the DA Show iTunes page, subscribing there, and you'll get the PGP as well. Also available on our website, daoncbs.com. You know, we're just a couple of weeks away from Skip Bayless debuting at FS1, and that represents a bit of a sea change, if you will, in our industry, in sports media industry, because he's highly paid and, in this case, highly publicized, had success at ESPN, and now going to FS1, will this grand experiment work? So I wanted to have on a guy that studies this for a living because I think it's really interesting, not only to sports media people, but also to sports fans, because if this works, it might mean that there's a ton more where there's on-air sparring and debating in this way. And there's already some of that, but who knows? Maybe there could even be more of that. So the president of Barrett Sports Media, he's a sports radio consultant, a talent scout, media writer as well. You read his website, sportsradiopd.com. That's got breaking news of the sports media realm. And you follow him on Twitter at sportsradiopd. He's a former program director himself at a lot of successful radio stations in sports radio. And that is my friend Jason Barrett. JB, how you doing?
I'm doing well. You've already made me sound more important than I really am, but I appreciate it.
You know, I wanted to talk to you and pick your brain because we are just a few weeks away now from FS1's latest venture involving Skip Bayless. Now we have the information. It's going to be Shannon Sharpe alongside him, and they're going to go all in on debate this fall. They've already had Speak for Yourselves with Whitlock and Coward, and I wanted to know what your sense was in terms of the industry, because FS1's betting big on debate. But there are others that say this is already kind of a theme and a genre that is past its prime. So from where you sit, what do you view, where do you stand on this venture that FS1's going in with Skip?
Well, I think there's a couple of components to it first. I mean, if you look at the talent that they've landed in Bayless, Sharpe, Cowherd, Whitlock, you could even go a couple layers beyond that with Katie Nolan, Clay Travis, Nick Wright. They all fit that mold. And, you know, if you look at who's running Fox Sports, that's Jamie Horowitz, who came from ESPN, who was the architect of the first Take show. So obviously it's a comfort level. It's what he knows. And I tend to agree with him that if you look, you know, everybody talks about they can't stand First Take, but the show continues to dominate with numbers. And everybody, you know, if you talk to people in this industry, most would say, whether you agree with their takes or not, Colin Cowherd, Jason Whitlock, Skip Bayless, they're pretty thought-provoking. And so if you're going to compete against ESPN, everybody talks about don't do that. And my answer to them all the time is, okay, then what's the alternative? Because here's the reality. You can tell me that you want to be more journalism-focused, you want to break news, you want to feature more games. Well, first of all, from a business standpoint, go look at some of those contracts that all these networks are spending billions on for play-by-play rights. It's what's crippling them right now. Now, the interest level is strong, but just because the interest level is strong doesn't mean it's a good business decision. So from the debate side of things, I understand that, listen, it's never going to draw the audience that play-by-play does. On the other hand, it's a lot cheaper to run. It does command audience, and at some point, you have to carve your own identity. And opposite a behemoth like ESPN, I don't know how many different layers of programming is out there right now to do. And if you're in Jamie Horowitz's shoes and this is what you know and it's what you've had success with, I can't fault them for attempting that. Now, Whether or not it's my cup of tea, for every Colin Cowherd who I value and I think is tremendous, I'm not as excited about some of Skip's antics. But do they work? Absolutely. So, I don't think it's as simple as, is it a failure or is it a success? I think it's about carving your own niche, trying to make good business decisions to get on the map. Because let's face it, 2 years ago, nobody was talking about Fox Sports 1. And if they went into, adding a bunch of play-by-play, would you go to it over ESPN? Probably not, unless they're putting, the entire NFL package exclusively there. So I think they have to find some areas where they could necessarily build a unique identity. And this is going to take 3 to 5 years before you can really see where they're at. Everybody makes snap judgments based on the minute a show comes out, but as well as I do, DA, most of the time it takes, a good 2 years before you really know where a show is at.
You touched on something interesting. We hear a lot about how the price tags of guys like Skip Bayless are too expensive, and that's why ESPN got rid of them, that FS1 spending $5 million a year on Skip or $7 million a year on Colin or whatever it is so expensive that ESPN said, no, we're not going to go there. But you point out that that's a drop in the bucket comparatively to rights fees where you're spending hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of dollars. So when ESPN said no to those guys, did they feel like they were too expensive, or did they feel like they just didn't want to go that? They didn't want to keep, I guess, digging into that genre?
I think, you look at it from ESPN's standpoint. The one thing they have been notoriously successful for is they develop future stars. And everybody's got a price tag at some point. So, in their world, they wanted to keep Colin and Skip. Jamie was willing to pay a little higher than they were, and the fact that he had a personal relationship with both is why they're there. I don't think Colin or Skip jumped for that job unless Jamie Horowitz is running Fox Sports. But to your point about price tags, if you spend $30 million on talent and it meant that you were going to land 500,000 viewers, or you spent $350 million on play-by-play rights and it tripled your audience or even 10 times your audience, it ultimately comes down to how much are you spending versus how much can you make. And if Jamie Horowitz feels that, hey, listen, we'll never be as big from a cume standpoint of how many total people watch our programming, but we'll also never be spending 10 times what ESPN is spending on talent, that's where it really comes down to whether or not it's a success. It's not as simple as how many people are watching, how much did it cost for, Fox Sports 1. So what if they don't record the numbers that First Take does? As long as they can create a profitable business and a compelling number 2 that with some time they can ultimately push the number 1, well, that's really where they should be right now.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned these exploding rights fees, and then what's your return on investment there? Do you think in the next 10 years we will have kind of a DEFCON 4 where the rights fees have superseded what you could make back on them, especially since viewership is going to keep fragmenting and we're going to keep watching on multiple screens and maybe just getting highlights via the internet or via social media, via Twitter, et cetera, to where these corporations, these media conglomerates will be caught in monster contracts that they just go, I can't believe we're still locked into this for the next 10 or 15 years?
I definitely think that's where we're headed. And I think, look at it from a number of standpoints. TV companies are going to benefit because at some point they're going to pay less for the programming. Now, if you're in the shoes of, someone running the NFL, MLB, NBA, or NHL, the first thing you're going to look at is, well, we've got to replace that revenue. And that's why, including the Twitters, the Googles, the Apples, the Facebooks, all of these brands, and by the way, some of these own media companies, I mean, your company, CBS, NBC, Fox, they're all going to want to play in the digital space because that's where the majority of money is headed. So there's no shortage of interest in the programming today. The fact is there's just scattered interest. So now maybe instead of watching 2 hours of TV, you watch 1 hour TV and you watch another hour of videos on your phone or on your iPad. So it's not that the networks or these leagues won't still have the same audience or even bigger audiences. You can make the case that there's more interest across multiple platforms now, but it's having to fragment that money in a number of different locations to ultimately, get to where they are now, but also exceed it down the road if you're running these professional sports leagues. If you're in the media company's shoes, you're looking at, hey, the reality is television viewing is less than it was 2-3 years ago. And, right now to be spending where you were 3 to 5 years ago over the next 10 years, that's a scary business proposition. So I think they've ultimately have to recreate their strategies, look at, what they're spending versus what they're making, because nobody could foresee the way digital has exploded and essentially become the number one threat to television. So, in some ways, I think that it's a blessing for TV because they'll spend less down the road. But ultimately, if those viewers are now going to digital devices to watch, the challenge of every media company becomes, how do I get them to watch it on my platform digitally versus going to someone else?
So on that point, I often wonder what companies or leagues are doing it well, because it feels like a lot of this industry is reactionary. We wait to see if something succeeds or fails, and then we try to copycat that. We try to say, oh, if it failed, we won't ever do that again. Or if it's working, oh, let's try to do that. Who is at the front end of this digital evolution and where content is going, where you go, okay, those guys or those women are the trailblazers, either from a company, a media company, or from a league? Is there anybody that strikes you that way?
I think it's in a couple of different ways. First, the one thing I'll give ESPN is they've always been a find us anywhere and we're their kind of company. They promote themselves as, on TV, on the app, on radio. They've always been, for the fact that they have the 4 letters behind them and they have the branding, they've always been really good at directing you to multiple locations. And so I don't think they're going to slow down anytime soon. If you go beyond that, obviously Twitter just entered the digital space with the NFL for this year. Yahoo did it last year. I didn't think long term, and obviously with Yahoo selling, that complicates some things. It'll be interesting whether or not Verizon, who's rumored to be buying them, and that's expected to come down here, how they factor into this because of the fact that, they're in the phone business. But you look at the way music changed with iTunes taking over the market and then Spotify and Pandora. That's, at one point, think about it. We used to watch MTV for music. Now you watch it on YouTube and you're listening to it on all these devices. And sports programming is going to go through some of that same transformation where maybe the ESPNs are partnered with the NFL and Twitter, and Facebook to make sure the platform is promoted in all these locations. I think one brand that I've been really, I can't say from a business standpoint they're where they need to be, but one brand that I think has really done it well coming out of the gate has been what Adrian Wojnarowski's done with his vertical. If you look at it, they play in the podcasting space, they play in the written space, and their video production is outstanding. And by having great content and being in those 3 locations, it makes them more attractive to other media companies. So if you're Verizon, and you're inheriting Yahoo, you're going to want to promote that because it's going to obviously be attractive to future clients. The same is true on the radio side. Just yesterday, they announced a deal with SiriusXM, who's picking up their podcast. So, look, if you create good content, you promote it across multiple platforms, it's going to become attractive. But to where you started the question about being the trailblazer and who's doing it great, unfortunately, there's not really this Facebook of the sports media space, if you will, that's really went front and center. But I think when you have the assets like an ESPN does with their multiple platforms, that certainly gives you an advantage.
So to jump off that and to conclude, I look at Bill Simmons, who's always, I think, been looked at as a bit of a trailblazer. The way that he attacked podcasts and had success there, the way that he attacked online column writing, and his success there. And now he has moved away from ESPN and obviously developed The Ringer, Grantland, 30 for 30, but now The Ringer, the HBO show, and doing the podcast again. And Bill is getting skewered for the HBO show. And I wonder, to me, it feels a little bit too heavy-handed, as though everybody was waiting either for this thing to completely revolutionize sports television, or there's a resentment to his success, and so people are waiting to bury him. But, like, it feels like we're only 2 months into this, and you said 2 or 3 years it takes to really grade out, and he is just getting lambasted all over the place. What have you felt about the reaction to what Bill has done after leaving ESPN?
Well, you're dead on with your assessment there. I think there's been this army of critics waiting for him to fall flat on its face, and you have those who champion the Bill Simmons cause who are waiting for him to become the messiah for sports media. And here's the reality. I think Bill's always been an incredible writer. I love his podcast, the fact that it's free-flowing and feels like you're listening to a collection of his friends, just basically BS about a number of sports issues, and it's fun. It feels loose. On television, he's come across as stiff and not comfortable. I think part of that, and this is just one man's opinion, others will have different perspectives on him, but what I've noticed is when Bill's at his best is when he's reacting. And in TV, Bill's in a position where he's got to be the driver. And some guys are just naturally comfortable doing that. Some guys aren't. And I don't know, 6 months from now, he may be incredibly smooth with it. But out of the gate, to expect a guy who's never been a driver, has never been, ultimately create a weekly Conan O'Brien show of sports, who hasn't been in that space, that's challenging. And so I think, that's why you're getting some of these early, blemishes on his record. But back to the whole point of this, as far as being a media brand who's in the right locations, I think that's one thing Simmons has always done well. With The Ringer, with his podcast, with TV, he's got the right idea. The question is, does he have the skill set to be strong in all of those areas? And quite frankly, DA, not everyone is great at doing all those things. I mean, most people are good at 2 or 3, not at 3 or 4. And so, he's got to figure out how to become a television star, which is way different than being a polarizing writer and a gifted guy who can, have a loose, free-flowing podcast. So if he can pull that off, definitely he'll have a strong brand there to work with. But I think if he doesn't succeed on HBO, it can hurt him, because you can be strong with The Ringer, you can be strong with the podcast, but ultimately, the majority of that money that he's saying and that people are counting on him for is with his HBO program. So he's got to deliver there.
Jason Barrett is the president of Barrett Sports Media. You got to check out his website if you haven't already. If you're in the industry, I'm sure you have, and that is sportsradiopd.com. He's got tons of breaking news and a new column on tapping into the brand's history of your sports radio station or your radio station in general. He's a radio consultant for sports media, talent scout, media writer, etc., speaker, media guest as well. You can follow him on Twitter at SportsRadioPD. JB, it is good to catch up, my man. Keep doing what you're doing, and we will talk again.
You got it, buddy. Good talking to you.
All right, thanks much to Jason Barrett for joining us here on the Permission Granted podcast. The overwhelming critique of Simmons' HBO show, Any Given Wednesday, to me is it leaves me shaking my head a little bit. Simply because all of us in sports media expect to be given some amount of time to let something gestate, to let something grow, to let something become what it's supposed to be. None of us in sports media like the idea of having 6 weeks or 4 weeks or 2 shows somehow grade us, somehow be the end-all, be-all. None of us appreciate that. Now, I realize the heat lamp is on Bill far more than it is on most people, because he is probably the most visible sports writer in America and one of the most visible sports media members. So I get it, and there's pressure at HBO, and with wealth and with money and with contracts, with notoriety and attention comes less patience. Get it. But it's just seemed like people were waiting for it to be bad in some way so that they could skewer it. And then the moment one person skewered it, it was like, okay, floodgates are open, let's crush it. And I'm like, damn, we all want patience in this industry, but we are totally unwilling to give it to Simmons on this show, even though everything he's ever done has been pretty successful, if not extraordinarily successful. So I find that a little unfair. I do. And I actually think a lot of it is really enjoyable. Are there things that I would tweak as well? Sure. If I'm the executive producer there, I would tweak some things. But the overwhelming cacophony of criticizing that show, it's like, boy, is that the only show in sports media that matters? Is anything else getting graded out even to 0.1% that any given Wednesday is? It's almost as though that is the ship that all the rest of sports media, is cargo on. And if that's not good, well, there's hell to pay. It just seems a little insane to me. I don't see the media critique of podcasts, of other sports radio shows, of other television shows nearly to the extent. I mean, it's become its own cottage industry to critique any given Wednesday. And it's in its second month. Pretty extraordinary, pretty astounding, but I understand some of that comes with the territory. All right, side B of the Permission Granted podcast right now.
All right, welcome into Side B of the Permission Granted podcast. Hope you enjoyed that interview with DA and Jason Barrett. This is Sean Mraz, the executive producer of the DA show, joined in a very special Side B. How about this one? With both associate producers of the DA show. To my right is Jolton Joe D'Aloisio, and on the phone from his apartment with a fan he just had to turn off in the middle of a heat wave is James Ward. James, how are you?
I'm doing well. I guess Joe's next Permission Granted podcast appearance, I'll have to join on the phone too, since we're sharing our airtime here.
It's funny because right before I brought Joe in here, he goes, "Are you sure this is okay? I don't know what to do here. What are we going to do? 3 people here? I don't understand."
To be fair, this is my first 3-way, and I didn't want to interrupt or disturb. I know you take this very seriously, Ward, so I felt bad coming in, but Mraz is the executive producer, and he made an executive decision here.
Well, listen, we're on Permission Granted Podcast 104, right? So we're 4 into the bicentennial, something like that?
Don't ask me, Ward. Take that one.
I think centennial actually implies that there's years involved, so I don't think that works. But
okay. Well, my point being here is if this goes well, which 82 seconds in and counting in, it has not gone well. Maybe this is something we continue with all 3 of us, since all 3 of us work on the show. But who knows? We'll see.
I will say this. I bought the new Phil Steele magazine finally after looking at all the bookstores around my house, magazine shops. So I'm pumped to read that. So pretty much nothing that happens today will ruin my day.
Okay. All right. How about that? So James is all into the college football, and I'm going to get to that. But first, Ward, 2 weeks ago when Joe had his disaster in Canton that was discussed here in the Permission Granted podcast, you too were on a vacation, a not very publicized vacation, at least on the show or anything. But I wanted to touch on it for a sec. You and your girlfriend, or fiance, I keep forgetting fiance.
Right, damn it.
Jeez. You guys flew to the Pacific Northwest and went to Seattle. Now, why would any sports fan of the show care about a trip to Seattle? Well, very simple. You guys got to check out Safeco Field and went on a very special night, some of which might shock some people. Why don't you tell us what happened when you went to Safeco Field?
So 2 things. Aurora and I, my beautiful fiance, we do vacations every summer. We try to go to just different kind of places. Neither one of us are like a cruise or tropical island type people. So we like to kind of go to places we haven't been and just kind of explore.
Right, very pasty white. Don't get me out of the sun. Just get me somewhere fun.
Right. So Seattle, place neither of us had been. So we went to Seattle. Of course, if you go to Seattle, baseball fan like myself, you have to check out the Mariners game. Not only was it a Mariners game, it was also Ken Griffey Jr. weekend where they had festivities surrounding his Hall of Fame trip. So Friday night was Ken Griffey Jr. bobblehead night, which is the game we went to. Saturday night was the Ken Griffey Jr. number 24 retirement ceremony.
Which, by the way, if I could stop you, it's stunning to me that they haven't retired his number already. Like, this was only happening this year in 2016.
Right. In New York, Yankees don't wait. Rivera's number got retired, 2 seasons after he finished playing? So Saturday was the Ken Griffey Jr. retirement ceremony, and Sunday was the a uniform. They gave away replica uniforms or something like that. So anyway, we did not have tickets going out there. We bought tickets the night before the game, $100 a ticket on StubHub. We sat in the third row on the Mariners dugout. Best baseball seats I've ever sat in my entire life. Other thing interesting about the trip, we were kind of palling around in the touristy district of Seattle about 3 o'clock, and Aurora's friend called her and was like, "You guys got to get in line now. The line's already, down the street around the corner."
So how down the street and around the corner? Like how? Like around just an outfield corner? How long was this line?
We stopped doing what we're doing. We got to the ballpark about 3:30, 4 o'clock. The line was literally 1 mile long.
That's insane.
From my place in line to the entrance of Safeco Field, per Google Maps, it was 1 mile. At 4 o'clock for a game that started at 7 o'clock for a regular season baseball game.
And what time the gates open?
Gates were supposed to open at 5:30, and they ended up opening them early because the crowd was just insane. So we ended up getting a bobblehead, but I think there were about 40,000 people in attendance, which for a regular season Mariners game against the Angels was absolutely amazing. The atmosphere was great. The food was good. The ballpark was very nice. Some of the complaints about the ballpark that I had read online, because I like to do a little bit of research before I go to these places.
Right.
Atmosphere not great. Fans not very into the game. But because it was a special night, because there were a ton of people there, everyone was into the game from the first pitch to the last pitch. So it was a really, really good experience.
Now, James, be honest. Was it worth the wait for a bobblehead? And is it like a good-looking bobblehead? Is it a classic one?
It's not the David Ortiz not for air bobblehead?
Exactly. Because I haven't seen what it looks like, so I don't know if that's a bad job by me or.
Well, so I collect bobbleheads. Aurora and I like going to different ballparks in different cities on bobblehead night to kind of collect bobbleheads. So we have all of them above our TV. And it is definitely the nicest one we own by far. So nice that one part-time CBS Sports Radio and WFAN host, one John Jastrzemski / JJ After Dark, actually texted me saying, "Listen, if there's an extra bobblehead, pick it up for me. I don't care what it costs. I need it. It's the nicest bobblehead I've ever seen." It's Ken Griffey Jr. standing there, and he's got the Hall of Fame plaque in front of him. It's really awesome and there's already versions of it going for like $100 on eBay. So it's a sought after bobblehead for sure.
See, here's my problem with that bobblehead. So how many did they give away? You said 40,000 people were in the park. How many bobbleheads did they give away?
I think they gave away 20,000.
Okay, so now DA had told this story on the air. I forget which one of you guys was in, how he basically bought tickets to Mike Piazza bobblehead day, similar situation after the Hall of Fame, and he ran to the stadium while his girlfriend was sleeping to get the bobblehead, went in, looked at the field, and left with the bobblehead, didn't stay for the game just to make sure he got it. Now, the whole problem I have with these bobbleheads is when they come out and they're very commemorative, if you will. So Piazza, Griffey, obviously this year with the Hall of Fame. The Yankees earlier in the year gave away like a Mickey Mantle Triple Crown bobblehead in honor of that anniversary. Like, these are really cool. Why must they only give away to get the first amount of people in the park? I guess to make sure they're in there, and then they're going to end up spending on concessions, and before you know it, they've made their money on it. Can you just make enough bobbleheads so that everybody in the park gets one, so no kid goes home unhappy, and any extras you have, you turn around and you sell it in your merchandise store anyway?
It's a collector's item. They want to make sure it's a collector's item.
But 40,000 doesn't make it a collector's item?
No, not if everyone there gets one.
What? But then that's all the people that could get one. Then is everybody there? If let's say you make everyone for the amount of seats you have in the park, that's still a collector's item.
Yeah, I guess, but I like the fact that you have to show up early. I like the fact that
that's hogwash.
If you really want it. Hey, listen, I got a Nolan Ryan bobblehead from Citi Field, and I got there in the second inning, and I still got a bobblehead. So if it's a sought-after bobblehead, if it's something that people want, they'll show up early and they'll get it, or they'll show up late and they won't.
So that Nolan Ryan one isn't worth much then if you got there late and you still got your hands on one.
No. There was, I think I looked. They're going for like $7.99 on eBay.
Now, how many of these bobbleheads do you have? And do you often look at how much they are worth? Do you plan on selling them or anything like that?
We have 5. We have 2 we have doubles of 5 different ones. We have Masahiro Tanaka from Yankee Stadium, Nolan Ryan from Citi Field, Evan Longoria from visiting the Tropicana.
You got some collection.
I saved the best for last. So obviously Ken Griffey Jr. and I have a Javi Lopez Braves bobblehead.
Boy, that's a weird one.
Who?
The former catch? Come on, Joe.
Javi Lopez.
I was 8 years old when he played.
Yeah, if that. Joe might not have been alive when Javi Lopez played.
Javi Lopez doesn't ring a bell in my book.
Javi Lopez, is he a girl I know's father? Who is this guy?
Yeah, Javi Lopez, one of the best hitting catchers of the 90s.
Oh, good to know.
Joe is so lost in this. All right, well, let's transition away from bobbleheads.
Javi Lopez might as well be like a death metal band to Joe.
Very briefly, I want to hit on this topic for 2 minutes before we close out with a couple thoughts on the show the night of, which we've been hammering here weekly on the Permission Granted podcast. You guys now, we're 2 weeks away from college football season. We're 3 weeks away from the NFL. And I want to tip my hat to you guys because for Joe, this will be the second year. For James, this will be the fourth year where you guys on football Saturdays and Sundays have, I would argue, the most difficult jobs at CBS Sports Radio at any time of the year, and that is just the hecticness that comes with football season. Are you guys excited, angry, ticked off, or kind of feeling refreshed and looking forward to what you're about to embark on with football season?
So we're lumping Joe in with me?
All right.
That's honestly, James, I was going to say that's not fair at all.
Okay.
I'm there 2 hours Saturday night, 2 hours Sunday. James does all the work.
Okay. James definitely has James is the producer for those of you listening who may be riding around the car listening to your local affiliates on Saturdays and Sundays. The Eye on College Football hosted by Yak, the Eye on Football hosted by Yak, and Sunday Morning Football hosted by DA, all produced by James Ward. And then to clean up the mess at night comes Joe D. So, James, you obviously have to put in more hours. How do you feel about the upcoming football season?
To be honest, there's a lot more stress involved. There's a lot more pressure involved. But it kind of makes me do a better job, if that makes any sense.
I totally agree.
I feel like I can't wake up Monday and just kind of fart around and not pay attention to anything like I can on some of these summer weeks, whereas Monday during football seasons, I really have to get going. I really have to look at potential guest ideas for the weekend. I have to start my Ward's Winners blog. I have to really get into it right away. So I don't have a lot of days off where I don't do anything work related, but I actually like it. I like the pressure of it. I'm not really sure if I'd say that I like it, when I'm in the heat of it in like week 4 or whatever, and I haven't slept at all, and I've been, working 10-hour days every week. But I like the pressure of it. I like trying to come up with interesting guest ideas. I like trying to track down some of these former players at these big schools, when there's rivalry matchups, like when you got, USC, Notre Dame, and the end of the season, trying to find guys that had big moments in the series and stuff like that. So
right.
I like the pressure. It's stressful. It's tiring, long days, but looking forward to it right now.
Joe, how about you?
Yeah, like James said, they're very, very long days. I can't take any credit. Like I said, I only do the last 2 hours on Saturday and Sunday. The one thing that I did notice is it's a long day for Ack, who hosts it. So by the time I get there, he's just really struggling and needs some extra help on my end, which then adds some stress from me, making sure everything's there. James leaves, and I probably text him about 100 times that, where can I get this? Where can I get that? How do I find this? How do I find that? So technically he leaves, but he's still working.
Now, James.
Yeah, I get off the subway sometimes, and I got like 8 texts from Joe. Where's this? Where's that? Never mind, I got it. It's okay, I got it. How do I get him to stop asking about this? What are we doing here? So, yeah, that's actually a good point. I forgot about that. That's one thing I'm not looking forward to for football season.
Text from Joe.
Well, that's not changing, so be ready.
Now, James, obviously the host, DA, who we work with, obviously, on the DA show, you get to work hand in hand with him on Sunday Morning Football. Is there anything new that we should be looking forward to on Sunday Morning Football this season?
Not confirmed. Obviously, we're still going to try to get the best guests possible. There is a potential that one big CBS Sports NFL analyst will be joining DA at least monthly on the show. So that'll be pretty good. I think if that happens, listeners will be pretty excited about it. But we're still going to do kind of the same segments that we did last year. We're still going to do a gambling segment for all all you big time players of NFL games, dropping a little cheddar on the football spreads.
Whoa! Hey, he used cheddar and spread in the same line there. That's a good job by James.
Impressive.
I know. All I needed was like some cracker metaphor, and then we'd be good to go.
All right. Well, now let's wrap up this Permission Granted podcast with a couple minutes on the show that is Grip the Nation the night of. Again, your spoiler alert. For those who are listening, James Ward, just like myself and Joe, I know DA's into the show. I mean, people around this newsroom are into the show. And if you see Twitter on a Sunday night, it lights up for the show the night of. So as we stand now, we are 2 episodes away. We have completed 6. I need everybody's updated list of scenario. Is Nas convicted of guilty or not guilty? And who is the actual murder? James?
I'm going with the guy I said all along. I think the murder was too personal for it to be a random person, whether it was the Dwayne Reed character that we learned about last week, whether it was the guy from the funeral home who we learned a little bit about this week. It was too personal of a murder with the 22 stab wounds on her 22nd birthday for it to be someone other than the stepfather. And now with the addition of the money that the stepfather is going to get with her death, I still think it has to be the stepfather. I don't see it being any other way. The thing that's interesting to me is that Nas is obviously getting hardened by Rikers prison and turning into, I mean, we saw him smoke crack in the last episode. He's getting prison tattoos. So the thing that's interesting to me is by the time he gets found not guilty, is he already too far gone to really be the same kid that he was before he went to prison.
Okay, I'm going to let Joe give his theory in a sec, but I just have a rebuttal to what you just said there. And that is, yeah, he's getting the tattoos looking ridiculous, but there is that scene with a little male-on-male interaction where after that, Nas picks up the phone and calls his lawyer, the cell phone he shouldn't have, and calls the lawyer, and he talks about being locked up with a bunch of animals in the zoo. And it seems like that was a real a revelation moment for Nas where he kind of had a wake-up call, like, what the hell am I doing in here? So I don't know if I think he might have like a little spinneroo, if you will, from going to the hardened criminal to, I don't want to spend the rest of my life in here. And I think we saw that moment in that episode, but I could be wrong. I may have read that wrong.
I think that's a good ploy. I think with that, I think he likes his lawyer, so I think he was just trying to see how he could get himself away from that prison cell. So he called the one person that I think he really likes.
Oh, that's fair. Joe?
Yeah, I agree with James. From the start of the show, after that, the first couple of episodes, I thought it was the stepfather. I thought when earlier, I think it was episode 3, when he went to identify the body, he was just in total. He claimed that that wasn't his daughter, and I think that he was just in total shock seeing what he did, and piecing everything together. What we learned in this past episode. And how he's going to pretty much cash in now from her death, I think it all makes sense that the stepfather committed the crime. At the same time, though, the stepfather may be connected with Dwayne Reed because in this episode, we don't see Dwayne Reed at all. I think they do that on purpose there.
Yeah. I'm agreeing with Joe. I think the stepfather's in on it. Now, I've always said from the beginning, I thought Dwayne Reed, who we didn't know his name at the beginning, was the killer. I still think he is the killer, but I think he was hired by the stepfather. I think that's where they're pointing you. And I think the hearse driver there is there to throw you off. I think he's just a creep. And if I could, as a rebuttal to something James also said earlier, when he mentioned it about being personal, and I think maybe I found the one mistake in this show, if you will. They mentioned the 22 stab wounds, and that kind of shocks Totoro. And that might have been like 4 episodes ago, right, James? That was a while ago?
Yeah, I think it might have even been the 2nd episode of the show.
And that's supposed to make you feel like, okay, this is something personal. And I get that, and maybe that is the reason it's personal with the stepfather being involved in everything. But my question to that would be, Andrea already has 1 stab wound by Nas stabbing her in the hand to start that night of the night of, right? So did they screw up by saying she had 22 stab wounds and making it personal? Because then technically only 21 of the stab wounds would have been from the killer.
Never thought about that before. That's interesting.
Right? And maybe that was one mistake the show made because they're trying to make you feel like it's personal. Maybe they'll go back to it's personal. She had 22 stab wounds, where in reality, 1 is not from the killer. We already know 1 stab wound is from Nas. And you have to count that. I mean, it's obviously a huge gash, and it's a stab wound.
Right, and she was bleeding profusely out of her hand, so I'm sure they definitely saw that.
Right, so maybe that was a mistake by the show. Maybe 22 stab wounds means nothing, and that was meant to throw us off, and nobody thought of that angle. But that was just something I had to throw in there because that part of it didn't make sense to me.
That's a good point. I gotta say this. I put it on Twitter yesterday. Enough with John Stone's feet. I mean, we get it.
They're
His feet are
cured. That
gross.
was the biggest part of the episode. They're cured.
Yeah, but there's been like at least 5 to 10 minutes on his stupid feet every single episode. We get it. His feet are gross. He's got the eczema. He's got the dry skin. Okay, cool. We don't need to spend 10 minutes of that on every single episode. It's almost like he made Turturro wanted to make sure that his feet got top billing on the marquee. It's like starring Anthony Turturro and Anthony Turturro's feet. Like it's a little weird for me.
I agree with you, James. I think the feet, it's disgusting. It's gross. I'm tired of seeing it. But at the same time, I think there's more of a meaning to those feet. I thought, like, as you saw his feet getting worse, all right, it looked as if things were getting worse for Nas. Now that his feet are better and cured, it makes you think that there's some hope for Nas.
Joe playing the symbolism game with the feet.
Yeah,
James not buying
James,
it.
I'm with you. I think it's disgusting, and I'm tired of him scratching it. And I'm glad his damn feet are healthy now. But at the same time, I think there's more of a meaning to the feet.
Interesting.
Yeah, but it's still so gross. Like, I just don't. I don't know. And I said Anthony Turturro. It's John Turturro. I don't know who Anthony Turturro is, but the John Stone, John Turturro characters. It's like, all right, your feet are gross. They're cured. We better not see them again.
All right, well, so there we go. 2 episodes left. James has had it with the feet. Something tells me the feet will make another appearance. Boys, we've literally hit the wall on time here, so I'm going to let everybody go. But, James, give us a Twitter plug, and maybe you'll tweet out that Ken Griffey Jr. bobblehead for the world to see. What's your Twitter?
Twitter is @JamesWardCBS.
All right, and Joe D?
@JoeDCBS.
And you can follow me @MrazCBS. Tweet us all your night of thoughts here, as we will be definitely wrapped up on Sunday night when we check out episode 7, I guess, as the show is coming to an end. And thanks for listening to PGP 104. 105 comes your way next week. Have another tremendous summer weekend.